This is the grand finale of the Spartacus series, and also the only ending that fans want to see yet wish they didn't have to. No matter how reluctant, the inevitable conclusion of history cannot be changed. Many say that the show had a disappointing ending, but once you grasp the painstaking effort of the screenwriter, you will understand why this is precisely why many fans regard it as the top TV show. This is the ultimate battle between Spartacus's rebel slave army and the mighty Roman army. You might have seen accidents where someone mistakenly throws a bomb into their own troops, but you've definitely never seen someone deliberately order catapults and crossbows to fire upon their own 30,000 soldiers to annihilate Spartacus. Crassus does not hesitate to sacrifice 30,000 soldiers' lives to eradicate him and his remnants. Faced with Crassus's well-equipped 100,000 Roman soldiers, Spartacus's 10,000 rebel slaves seem overwhelmingly outmatched. From a combat perspective, this is undoubtedly a war destined for defeat. But to free more people, not a single soldier in the rebel army backs down.
Crassus will give command. We stand in the shadow of greater might, as their republic casts across the lives of every man, every woman, and every child condemned to the darkness of slavery. Let us teach them that all who draw breath are of equal worth, and that those that seek to place heel upon the throat of liberty will fall to the cry of freedom!
Hearing the resounding war cries from the rebel side, Crassus's eyes blaze with fury. Today, he is determined to utterly annihilate this ragtag bunch.
Raise ballistae and catapults! Ignite! Release!
As the catapults and crossbows launch towards the rebels, Spartacus immediately orders a charge towards the enemy. Crassus also blows the horn for attack, ordering 30,000 vanguard troops to march majestically towards the enemy. However, to everyone's surprise, when the rebel army charges to within 100 meters of the enemy, Spartacus suddenly orders his army to halt.
Hold!
Suddenly a huge gully appeared between the two armies and countless Roman soldiers fell into the traps designed by Spartacus. Spartacus immediately commands his archers to fire.
Now! Signal to form testudo!
This series of maneuvers leaves Crassus and Caesar dumbstruck. Spartacus doesn't give the enemy time to react. He leads the charge over the trench, heading straight for the heart of the enemy forces. The rest follow him, seizing the opportunity to furiously hack at the disoriented soldiers. They fight valiantly, overwhelmingly outnumbered, with the momentum completely shifting to the rebel side. In an instant, countless Roman soldiers are killed or wounded, but what Spartacus never anticipated was Crassus's ruthless determination to eliminate the rebel army at any cost. He orders the catapults and crossbows to aim at the chaotic battlefield, disregarding the lives of his own 30,000 soldiers. The front line instantly becomes a scene of continuous wailing and a field of corpses, many being burned alive in the melee. With no way back, Spartacus has no choice but to order the remaining rebels to continue charging forward. But ahead lies Crassus's 70,000 troops, and the few thousand remaining rebels are undoubtedly rushing to their deaths like moths to a flame.
The slaves fall to superior strategy and tactics
As to Romans beneath our command.
An unfortunate loss, that one gladly accepted to bring Spartacus to his end.
Fighters approaching!
Just when Crassus thought he had victory in his grasp, Gannicus suddenly led 1,000 cavalry in a surprise attack from the rear. They charged into the enemy camp with the speed of lightning, instantly scattering the enemy's formation.
Turn ballistae! Quickly! Two men! Defend the left flank!
Gannicus ordered the catapults and crossbows to be turned around and fired directly at Crassus's side. Faced with the rebel army's pincer attack, the deputy general began to panic and suggested a quick retreat. However, the composed and experienced Crassus did not lose his footing. He instructed Caesar to lead 10,000 soldiers to intercept the rebels from the rear. Crassus himself went into battle, leading the remaining 60,000 troops towards Spartacus.
Everyone! Show your flank! Do not let them close upon us!
In the chaos of battle, Crassus caught sight of Spartacus engaged in fierce combat. Crassus, believing his dueling skills to be flawless, drew his sword and charged straight at Spartacus. Spartacus also spotted Crassus. He stepped on a corpse and made a flying leap that cut Crassus to the... It was then that Crassus realized the gap between himself and the god of the arena. The gladiators who had practiced with him were only fearful of his power. Just as Spartacus was about to finish him, Crassus had already been escorted off the battlefield by his soldiers. Agron led men to rescue Spartacus from the encirclement. Spartacus entrusted everything to Agron. Due to the huge difference in strength between the two sides, the rebels were surrounded by the enemy. The only strategy now was for him to charge out of the enemy line and take Crassus' head. In this battle of few against many, there might still be a glimmer of hope. On Gannicus's side, even though they knew it was a suicide mission, each one of them was still fighting valiantly, but the enemy was too numerous, and one after another, the warriors fell.
This does not belong to you, slave.
Caesar killed Naevia with a sword thrust. At this point, Gannicus was the only one left in the rear of the insurgency, still struggling to hold on. Caesar wanted to rush over and kill him, but his skills were no match for Gannicus. A sea of soldiers pressed towards Gannicus. Even if Gannicus could take on 100 men, there was nothing he could do at this moment. Under the relentless pressure of the Roman army, Gannicus no longer had the strength to struggle. On the other hand, under the protection of a dozen soldiers, Crassus had already fled to the hillside. At this moment, Spartacus finally broke through the encirclement and charged in, his eyes wide with fury and blazing like torches, plunging directly into the crowd in a frenzied slaughter. Having battled on the field for decades, this was the first time Crassus had seen such a fierce warrior. He stood frozen, unable to utter a word, but fortunately for him, Spartacus, having already killed more than a dozen soldiers, was already exhausted. Moreover, Crassus had spent months learning from the top gladiators and was not entirely without a chance against an injured Spartacus. Looking at this Roman noble, whom he considered superior to others, Spartacus was filled with deep hatred. It was under their oppressive shadow that countless slaves lived lives of unbearable suffering. With every slash of his sword, Spartacus remembered those friends and family members who had been killed by them. This was the main reason that drove him to fight to the death in such desperate circumstances. Crassus was finally knocked to the ground, but fate played its cruel hand just as Spartacus was about to finish Crassus. An arrow violently pierced Spartacus's chest, followed quickly by a second and a third. Spartacus pulled out the arrows and tried to continue his attack on Crassus, but he no longer had the strength to struggle.
Would that you'd been born a Roman. And that stood beside me.
It was not so.
In his dying moments, Spartacus seemed to see a red ribbon on the ground, the only memento left by his wife Sura. and the only happy yet simple life he had ever wanted. Spartacus wanted to grab it, but in this class society where people eat people, even such a near wish is more difficult to grasp for millions of people like him than to reach the top of the sky. As Crassus raised his sword, preparing to kill Spartacus, Agron and his men charged in. Agron struck Crassus down the hillside with a sword blow. Agron wanted to go down and kill Crassus, but he saw a large number of Roman soldiers catching up. Reluctantly, Agron and Nasir had to help Spartacus up and quickly escape. Before leaving, Spartacus took one last look at the battlefield, only to find that it had been completely occupied by the Roman army. Perhaps this was all his destiny. After exterminating the rebel army, Crassus nailed all the captives alive on crosses, stretching for miles with no end in sight, until they all turned into mummified corpses under the scorching sun. He did this to declare to all slaves who thought of rebelling against their masters that this was the fate of those who opposed the Roman nobility. This included his most beloved lover, Chore. At this moment, Chore understood that she was nothing more than a pet kept by Crassus. No matter how much the master loved her, she could not violate the basic relationship between master and slave. Just then, Pompey arrived at Crassus's camp with Metellus. He was smug and proud because he had intercepted another group of fleeing slave armies. He wrote to the Senate to claim credit and received commendation from the Senate. The Senate considered Pompey the greatest contributor to the suppression of the rebel army. Faced with Pompey's shameless credit-grabbing, Caesar is infuriated. However, Crassus, seasoned in the political arena, quickly realizes the situation. A small sacrifice is necessary for the greater strategy. Crassus willingly gave all the credit for crushing the rebellion to Pompey, who now possessed considerable power, with the aim of winning over Pompey.
After all that we have suffered, you allow Pompey to snatch triumph from deserving hands.
Supporting claim he will be made ally.
You forever speak of the future.
Past cannot be altered. Present holds but regret and loss. It is only in the days to come that a man may find solace.
Under the scorching sun, Gannicus once again seems to see the person he dared not face. For years, Gannicus chose to be a person who drifted through this murky world, living a life of evasion and mere survival. Only when he took on responsibility and chose to stand up did he truly understand the meaning of life as it should be. Having fully realized this, Gannicus feels as if he has returned to his own arena, truly deserving the title of the god of the arena. When Spartacus wakes up again, he finds himself at the foot of the Alps. Laeta, true to her word, has been waiting here for his return.
Pompey set upon another half. Many were lost.
Stay, man. I would rest a while.
We cannot stay here.
No, you cannot. Nor can I follow.
Spartacus. Spartacus.
We shall finally hear it again, given voice by loving wife, in greeting longed for. Do not shed tear, and to fall from this world a free man.
Many people feel pity for Spartacus, but in fact, this slave rebellion was doomed to fail from the start. The Rome of that era was too powerful, and the institution of slavery was deeply entrenched. Although Rome had a vast number of slaves, the fundamental makeup of society was still Roman citizens. These citizens would never allow slaves to rule over them. Without a base of mass support, Spartacus never had his own stronghold until his death. With Spartacus's death from his severe injuries, this most famous and influential slave rebellion in human history finally comes to an end.
One day, Rome shall fade and crumble. Yet you shall always be remembered in the hearts of all who yearn for freedom.
Indeed, for over 2,000 years, people have remembered the name Spartacus, a symbol of the fight for freedom. Even though only his wife knew his real name, it no longer matters because Spartacus has transformed from the name of one man into a symbol of freedom. Those oppressed warriors longing for freedom, each and every one of them, are Spartacus.